Hi everyone, welcome to day 4. Today is our 4th student panel. Today we are talking about all things stressful. So we have, again, current students from Darden, Johnson, ISB, Booth, and Tepper. Before jumping into managing stress and managing time, I wanted to quickly go around the room and introduce everyone. So Tess, do you want to go first and introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us this afternoon.
Yeah.
My name is Tess, and I'm part of Darden class of 2020. Before Darden, I was in International Energy Access, and this fall I'll be joining Boston Consulting Group in their DC office.
Awesome. Joe, same thing. What did you do before Johnson? What are you doing after?
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. So before Johnson, I was in finance. I started in banking and then moved into credit research and ratings for a couple of years. I'm a 2021 should-be grad of Cornell. I'm currently interning at Accenture in the strategy practice.
Awesome. Aishwarya?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Aishwarya Ajay, and I recently graduated as part of the class of 2020, just like Tess, from the Indian School of Business, double majoring in strategy and marketing. Before this, I was working as the marketing and branding strategist and head of innovation for a mid-sized IT company, managing geographies across US, India, and Middle East. I also had a startup of my own, and here I am to talk to you all.
Awesome. Hey, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me, everybody. So my name is Michael Henry, currently part of the Booth class of 2021. Before coming to Booth, I was in consulting for 5 years in the cloud computing space. And I'm currently interning at Anheuser-Busch InBev within their international B2B e-commerce division.
Awesome. What about you, Josh?
Hi, everybody. So I'm currently in the class of 2021 at Tepper School of Business at Carnegie Mellon. Prior to Tepper, I worked in the chemical manufacturing industry as a production plant engineer doing day-to-day operations. And currently, I am a commercial sales and strategy intern at Blue Origin.
Awesome. Cool. So we will start with some of the expectations of stress before we go into how we ended up managing it. So business school is sort of known or infamous for being a highly stressful experience. So what was that like going into business school? And I'll start with Tess and Joe on this question. And how did you approach business school fully knowing that it's going to be stressful? Did you preempt some of that stress? Was there like a pre-MBA prep for all the stress that was going to come to you, or did you go in blank? I'd love to know that. So Tess, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am a planner. I'm pretty type A, as I imagine most people on this call are. So my plan over the summer before I started Darden was to mitigate as many unknowns as possible. I spent a lot of time thinking about what business school would be like and kind of forecasting for that, both in, what will this mean for walking my dog, which seems like a very small thing, but it was like a logistic thing I could hold on to. And, as much as I knew intellectually it would be stressful and as much as I planned for that, there was really nothing like being on the ground and kind of figuring out as you go. So I think the planning was helpful because it helped me mentally get my head around what that could look like. But really going in and being flexible was probably the best thing that I could have done.
What about you, Joe? Did you do any stress prep going in?
So I did two things. The first thing I did was take a bunch of exams to get exempt from a bunch of classes. That certainly reduced quite a bit of stress for my first semester by getting out of a few classes. So I highly recommend that. The other thing I did, I'm a huge mental health advocate. So I very quickly found, we call it CAPS, but it's our counseling center at Cornell, and aligned myself up with a therapist that I could start with as soon as I got to Cornell and I could actively talk to throughout the semester. She was extremely helpful, and I still keep in contact with her, but just helped manage stress along the process for sure.
Awesome. So business school, and again, I just recently graduated too, and I think the first couple of weeks were probably the hardest because there's a lot of adjusting involved, and you're sort of trying to meet a lot of people, and you have this pressure of making a good impression. I mean, it was a pressure for me because I don't generally make great first impressions. But so the questions for the three of you, Aishwarya, Michael, and Josh, how were those first couple of weeks? And I'm guessing they came with their own stress. I'm guessing there's a lot of social events involved, tiny bit of mid-exam, mid-semester stuff. So how did you tackle that? So Josh, I'll start with you, and then I'll move to the right of my screen, at least.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, great question. So I don't think I necessarily dealt with it the best way, but looking back at it, there are a few things I would have done a little bit different. So Tepper starts with a base camp period, which is about 3 weeks leading right up to the first day of school.
Right.
And I showed up to I showed up to Pittsburgh, just moved in like 2 days before base camp. I was still burning vacation from my last job. So still on the payroll. That's how close it was to when I would finish working, which I don't think was actually a great idea. That meant during base camp, I was doing things like getting the gas turned on in my apartment, figuring out stuff for my car, how do I transfer my license to Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Things about that. And so if you can take some of that and move it up in front, so take like an extra week where you just don't have anything planned before you start classes or base camp or whatnot, and get all those life things out of the way, your grocery shopping, going to IKEA, all those things,
assembling them.
help take one item of stress out of your sort of first 3 weeks experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think, Michael? How was that for you?
Yeah, for me, I'd say that there are really kind of 2 points that helped me with that transition into the first few weeks. First, and related to Josh's point, is if you're able to get a head start, definitely attempt to do so. I was fortunate in that I was living in Chicago before business school started as well. And so I used that time to really put together events for people who were coming to Chicago for the first time, really get to do some of that initial foundational work as far as being able to make acquaintances and make friends. And then the second part is really being able to say no. So going in with an idea of some things that you want to be involved in and some potential relationships that you want to really start to cultivate, so that when you get the push and pull of all these different things that you can do, you have kind of that North Star as far as being able to say, no, I don't think that's for me, or maybe in a few months, and then, not really returning in a few months, but really being able to have that in your mind going into it is definitely a help.
Aishwarya?
So similar to the base camp, we have something called the O week, which is exactly what it sounds like, an entire week filled with tons of activities. We barely get 3 hours of sleep. So it's a crazy time at ISB, and it's filled with a lot of give and take between the alum community. But I completely agree with Michael. One of the things that I did was kind of make a list of what I was really there for and what really mattered to me, what resonated with me, and what I naturally gravitate towards. And that's what helped me stick through that one crazy week and pick things that I really did want to do and be okay with letting go of things that didn't probably work for me, but work for somebody else. And again, with business school, there's so much pressure on, networking with everybody you see as soon as you enter campus. And that can get a little intense for people. So I think the biggest thing that saved me and a lot of my peers was that we had a community online before we got to campus, because our program, unlike the other MBA colleges, is only 1 year long. So we only get 52 weeks on campus. So we decided that, we're going to be these buddies together. So we made that community before coming onto campus. So that pressure was a little off by then.
Right. Awesome. So Michael, I'm going to come back to your point on being able to say no. I have more questions and follow-ups.
Sure.
But I wanted to go around the room and ask each and every single one of you. And some of you have spent 1 year in business school. Some of you have spent 2. Actually, just one of you have, well, 2 of us have spent 2. What was the most stressful moment in business school? I'm just trying to max out on curating the stress, and then we'll go into managing and reducing it. So most stressful moment, let's start with Tess again.
Yeah, so I would say that my most stressful moment, or like collections of moments, was sometime in October of my first year. I had come to grounds. I knew a group of people, but was still trying to find my footing, both socially and in the classroom.
Right.
Recruiting is also ramping up, and so you're trying to network, and so you have all these competing competing priorities on your hands. And someone described it to me as you have the option to choose between social, recruiting, and academics, and you can only choose two. So at any given point, which ones are you putting at the top of your list? When it feels really hard to not prioritize any of them. And I love Michael's point about having a North Star, because I think that's really critical. And I think something that was really useful to me was knowing that that North Star might change week to week. So maybe this week I really needed to push hard on recruiting because there are some critical deadlines. But maybe the next week it was more academics, and I really needed to make sure that I was where I needed to be in my finance classes.
Right. What about you, Joe? What was your most stressful moment?
I think Tess and I, we must be in, brothers and sisters, because October was probably the most stressful month of my first year. I remember just 1 week, I think things were just building up around exams and recruiting, and I was just like, I need some space to just breathe and step away from everything.
Yeah.
One of my tools, that I actually found really helpful was just talking to other people in my program. In a way, commiserating is like such a stress reliever, to just be able to be like, hey, like, this is just a tough week. Like, there's a lot of...
Jay, you're breaking up a little bit. Stress. All right, so I'm gonna move to Josh, and then when Joe comes back, we'll get to him again. So Josh, what was your most stressful moment?
Yeah, so probably a similar lines, but sort of January to February of this school year. That's when dual of having new set of classes, having the actual interviews for a lot of the internship positions I was applying to, as well as starting that transition period from just being members of clubs into the leadership positions in clubs. So picking up new responsibilities while also doing interviews, which in and of itself was hugely stressful, not just to interview, but you know it's important and you get very little feedback.
Yeah.
Often you just basically get a yes or a no. And there's a million parts of that interview you could break down about why it was a yes or a no. And so after I was fortunate to get a lot of interviews, but not a lot of success in the interviews at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, questioning, did I do the right thing? Should I change the whole strategy? And really the help for me there was the second years of my program, acting as mentors, giving me advice, taking the time to, even though they were also doing some recruiting and other things, doing a mock interview, even though I'd already done a bunch of interviews, just like make sure my answers sounded decent, and things like that. And so those second years were super helpful for me, just sort of keeping me grounded, getting expectations right, making sure I knew it was going to be okay at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. Michael, what was your most stressful moment? I'm checking in on Joe to see if he went for a yoga break. But what is your most stressful moment?
Yeah, let me know if you've heard this before, but October of that first year, and I love that Tess went through the business school trifecta of social, of academic, and recruiting, because it really is a balance. And I admire Tess for being able to readjust that by week, because for me, I was in the same balance for about a quarter.
Yeah.
But it really is a very interesting time to navigate, because there is so much that you are trying to do and do well. Then it's about really being able to pick your battles at that point, because in a given day, like before this, I went back and looked at my little color-coded calendar to see like what my days were looking like, and it was things like having class from 8:30 until 4:30, then recruiting events from 5 o'clock until sometimes 10 o'clock, and then figuring out, okay, once you reach 10 o'clock, do you sleep or do you do like social stuff? Or do you prep for cases? Do you send out those networking emails? Do you see if your sister is still okay, you know? So it's about being able to find that balance and navigating it the best way that you can. I think that especially with having so many type A personalities, it's good to have a realistic sense of kind of where your limits are, what helps you kind of center yourself. And like to Joe's point, as far as commiserating, not being afraid to have those conversations with the people around you, because guess what? Everybody is going through the same thing. So some people are better at hiding it, and I don't think that you should have to hide it.
Joe, we missed you, but I'm glad you're back. Do you want to finish your thought real quick? I have some thoughts as well, so I'll go.
Yeah. Talk about managing a stressful situation.
Yeah.
No, I'm back. My thought was just, honestly, as Michael was saying, like just managing stress by commiserating with others. Also just taking some time to breathe and separating yourself from whatever the stressor is, whether it's people, classes, recruitment, and just doing some things that you enjoy doing. I was really fortunate to be in Ithaca, which has like it's just surrounded by really beautiful nature, and being able to go on a hike or a run or
Sure.
go down to a waterfall, makes a huge difference.
Yeah, so I mean, October is such an awful, awful month. So I remember this was my most stressful moment. I was recruiting for tech, but I'm an international student, so I was there's a lot of uncertainties. I was practically recruiting for everything. So I was also doing consulting. So Microsoft was on my radar. So Microsoft has this thing called the Business Innovation Challenge, right? So we were selected. So we had this presentation on this one day in October. But McKinsey was also on campus, so I wanted to go for their recruitment presentation as well. And guess what? My slot for the presentation was at the exact same time. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll just do the Microsoft presentation because, well, I'm selected, so I have better shot at doing something there. And then I'll just come back to McKinsey. Maybe I'll miss the presentation, but I will, like schmooze in this post-networking thing. It also comes with free food, so that was an added bonus. The problem was Microsoft is super casual, right? And imagine like going to a McKinsey event like dressed in like a sweatshirt. So it was so stressful, and that was the point where I was like, there's the only way I can actually make it if I can be at two places at once, and Back to the Future is not happening, so I'm just screwed. I mean, so yeah, there was just really, really stressful moments, and I'm sure people, I mean, you guys must have very similar examples as well. And at that time, it seemed like this is something that I won't be able to manage, and this is something that's probably going to kill me. But I think looking back, I feel like there was a rhyme to that stress. Maybe that stress sort of made me more productive, or made me pushed me a little bit more. Did you guys feel that? I'm going to start with Tess.
Yeah, I totally echo what you said. And I think that I have several situations that were much like that in my first year.
Yeah.
I think that not only that made it better, but that in and of itself is a huge part of the MBA experience. So don't get me wrong, this is all important by nature of the fact that this is where you're committing your time and your money and your energy, and it's your future. But what you get in accounting doesn't really matter. Your accounting professor that, but it's really about how you find the tools that you personally need to deal with that stress, to deal with challenging situations.
Yeah.
And so one thing that was really helpful for me, and again, like hindsight's 2020, it did not feel this way October 2018, but really viewing each like incident as an experiment. So it's a new opportunity to put yourself in that situation and say, how would I handle this? Because over your internship or full time, you're going to encounter that same demand on your time, and the stakes are going to be higher. So in a relatively safe environment, how can you figure out what you personally need to be successful?
Awesome. So by the way, quick note for people watching, a ton of people are watching. It's going to be really hard to take all of your questions. So we'd really appreciate comments, feedback, etc. But if you have questions that you really, really want to get through, I would try to get the panel answer them, but it better be stressful. We are only taking stress questions today. So that's pretty much the domain. Okay, so Michael, I wanted to get back to your comment about saying no, right? I think that's super important. FOMO is real and all that stuff. So that's all true. So Joe, I want to start with you. What did you say no to in your first year of MBA that you really didn't want to say no to, right? Otherwise, it's not stressful. And how did you come to the brave act of saying no? So walk us through that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So two things. I had gone into MBA, into Cornell saying, oh, I'm absolutely going to join the beer and wine club. And I'm going to like just meet a ton of people there and make a lot of friends. And it's going to be great. And like, I'm going to learn more about wine. And we're going to drink, whatever. I got there and I arrived at that club fair on the first week. And I said, yeah, I'm interested, like put my name down. Like a couple weeks later, it came time to like pay dues. And I just started getting into recruiting. And I looked at like my classes and my schedule. And I was like, you know what, if I join this beer and wine club, it's just going to be, let's just say, not as productive for me when I'm trying to do other stuff that trying to advance myself academically or professionally. So I had to make the tough choice of not joining either of those clubs.
Yeah.
I certainly, I don't know what capacity people are going to be in the fall, but I certainly intend to join them for my second year. And I think that's part of the experience is when you come in saying, okay, maybe not everything I want to do, I do my first year. Maybe the second year is the time when I have more time and I have more ability to be able to do some of the things I want to do. So definitely going in and spacing things out and coordinating what your priorities are. That's ultimately what led me to make the decision to kind of take a pass on my first year for those two clubs.
Yeah, and like by the way, and Tess might allude to this too, it does get easier in your second year. You sort of have been through this process, so there you go. Josh, what did you say no to, and how did you manage to say no to?
So I'm not a great person at saying no. That's why I have 2 part-time jobs at school and on 4 club boards. But there were other clubs that I definitely needed to say no to, and also balancing out that sort of recruiting and academic and club life.
Yeah.
So there definitely, Carnegie Mellon has a ton of really cool options that are available to us that I've had to say no to, whether it be stuff out in robotics or public policy, things that would be very interesting to take while I have the chance.
Right.
But knowing that I do need to leave time for recruiting or other activities. And so also looking towards the second year as an opportunity for some of that. But also, really diving into each of those decisions, like which club is really going to be the one that I'm going to learn something or enjoy myself or really get that value out of.
Yeah.
What classes, especially when you start to pick your electives, that you're going to start getting that real value in, that learning something new. There might be some things where it's like, oh, I know a lot about this topic and I found it interesting. Well, maybe you already know a lot of what the professors are going to talk about, and it might not actually be the right course for you to take.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, and in terms of saying no, I think I'll just quickly share what I said no to. The Ross has 2 traditions. I went to Michigan, by the way. So one of them is the bus, and the bus is this weird thing that is like a huge culture shock, by the way. So Ross has football games. Football's big in Michigan, and so there's a bus on every Saturday before the football games. And you're just supposed to go there and drink and dance, which is great, which sounds great in theory. But if it's a Saturday morning, then your whole weekend is kind of shot because you sort of drank yourself at 11 in the morning. And I just couldn't do it. And that felt unusually ostracizing. But it was fine. I needed my weekend to sleep and to chill. And the other thing that I just didn't do was a few other social events. I'm generally introverted, but I think it feels harder at the beginning to say no to these things. But once you always find people who sort of get together and, talk about these things in the same unfriendly ways that you are thinking about these things. So you sort of band together in criticism of these things. So no, I found my tribe and I never looked back. But Michael, I'm excited to know what you said no to. So tell me more.
Well, first, kind of related to Joe, I had to give up wine club activities. It was a heartbreaker. but definitely made up for it this past quarter. So shout out to Booth Wine Club. As far as other things that I had to give up, was definitely around kind of those fringe activities that were on my priority list, but not nearly as high as others. So some examples of that. When certain companies would come to campus for their informational sessions or their recruiting events, if, let's say, a LinkedIn or a Facebook or a Microsoft or a Google would come to campus, and it's like, yes, these are really interesting places that may be great for some people's careers. If it wasn't on the path that I was looking for, like, did I really have the capacity to spend an hour and a half in these information sessions that ultimately I was not looking to pursue? These could be things like talks and lectures that visiting professors or visiting academics may have offered to give to the student body. But if maybe I don't really need to know about econometrics in upcoming economies, So being able to say no to those kind of, very interesting and great that they're available, but things that aren't really progressing my goals or priorities, just being able to put your foot down and say no and focus on other things.
Yeah, no, that sounds, well, for me, econometrics and economy does sound something that I would not say. But you know what? I'm really glad none of you said no to this, right? Like, you guys all had the opportunity to say no to the student panel. I'm really happy you didn't. But Aishwarya, what did you say no to?
Well, similar to other people on this panel, I've had to make the same sort of choices. I think the best thing that worked, and I think Joe alluded to this initially, was Joe and Josh alluded to it initially, was that you need to get to know the land before you actually foray into it. So situational awareness of sorts. So through my O week in the next, say, 2 weeks that we were on campus, everything was still, at a very nascent stage. Right. So we had the opportunity to get to know every potential avenue, which would be extracurricular or moving towards recruiting. So we were able to have those discussions with the stakeholders way before things began. And that really helped me make a list of what am I going to say no to and what is going to feature in my MBA journey. So that was really easy from that perspective, that getting that information and placing it where it's required. Also, again, examples of things that I've said no to. I've said no to a bunch of social events, just like you, Shavik. Yeah. I can totally relate. Sometimes that sleep is much more important and gets you through a lot more things than that party might. And I've always said sorry for the things that I wasn't able to attend, at least with my friends and social circles. And of course, same goes with recruiting. When I went into my MBA, I was very clear about the kind of role that I was looking to get into. I was looking to get into a corporate leadership program. So I was only looking at those recruiters who would actually come for that. And luckily Siemens happened, and that's where I'm heading. But that helped me say no to things that might not align with where I needed to go.
Yeah.
So very much on the same tangent as everybody else.
Awesome. That sounds great. Michael, I like the new artwork, new room. Looks great. Tess, what about you? What did you have the opportunity to say no to?
Yeah, so I would echo what a lot of the panelists have already mentioned. I do remember in particular, and this is maybe more of a cautionary tale, similar to Joe, when I was asked to join clubs, we had a week to look at clubs, kind of experiment, see what we wanted, and then really commit. And I got caught in the trap of, okay, well, it's my first year. One of my priorities is recruiting. I want to be involved in all these career clubs. That was where I wanted to spend not only my time, but also my money and being involved in those career clubs. And so I enrolled in those. And then a lot of like the more fun clubs I didn't do because I was like, well, I'm not gonna have as much time. And I think that, you should really listen to what you need to be successful, as a lot of people have already said, but sometimes getting an hour more sleep is going to do you more service than reading a case for another hour. Sometimes blowing off steam and going to a party is going to be better than getting an hour of sleep. it depends on who you are and any given day. But I wish that I had, Darden has a great Darden Outdoors Club. And I didn't join it because I was like, I'm not going to have time to hike my first year. But I think that not only the release of doing some of those more fun activities, but also opportunities to get to know my class during those first few weeks. I wish I hadn't said no to that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that could be a very interesting question too. Like, what do you wish you hadn't said no to? But moving to stress and stress management, I think Joe alluded to some of these resources, but what are some of the resources within campus or within your school that you leverage that sort of helped you manage stress a little bit? I think we have shared some of the stuff, but wanted a more structured response. Michigan has something called CAPS, and I think Johnson has very similar stuff as well, which is more geared towards mental health and just getting someone to talk to and someone professional. But did any of you use any specific resources? I know Joe's answer already, but if any of you used something else, unmute yourself. I'll know. Aishwarya, go for it.
So at ISB, we have, of course, a professional counseling setup with amazing counselors that you can meet at any point in your time. Just shoot them an email and they'll make time for you. But apart from that, there was this really cool initiative that was started on campus called the Cheer Catalyst Initiative, which was more of a peer counseling, active listening sort of an initiative where students could sign up, get trained by these counselors in the art of active listening. And, we used to, every Thursday, we used to sport these really nice, bright yellow T-shirts and walk around campus telling people that, hey, we're here for you. And if you want to talk to us, we're right here. And I used to carry a bag of sandwiches and be like, we'll do a picnic for all you care. And that really helped. I think commiserating really does help, especially when you're talking to your peer and not to somebody who's probably a faculty member or somebody else. You feel a lot more comfortable. It's very easy to share your insecurities and stresses. And I think that really, really pulled our cohort together. It helped me as well. I was part of the initiative, but it did help me. When a cheer catalyst was down, somebody else was always there to brighten your day. And that was really meaningful.
Right. If anybody else wants to add, just unmute yourself. Michael, there you go.
Yeah. So it's always interesting to hear how other schools are tackling this, and I'm definitely going to be taking some of these ideas back to Booth. So one of the things that Booth has started over the last year is creating a position within the administration to help address issues of mental health and mental wellness. And so the person in the role this past year, Carrie Leiden, has really helped to really provide more visibility around some of the resources, because they are very necessary once you get into what is a high stress environment. On top of that, from a kind of a structural standpoint, Booth does offer counseling services. I think it's like $10 a session, where you can see professional psychiatrist, therapist of your choice. And they are there. They have a whole U Chicago network to choose from. So it's that's something that's been really helpful as well.
Awesome. That's super important. And Josh, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah. So one of the things that we have at Tepper, in addition to a lot of the services that you guys have heard about, is we have what we call our Accelerate Leadership Center, and they have professional career coaches, as well as sort of like leadership coaches that. While normally you would think to talk to them about leadership challenges, how do I run this team, how do I manage this team? Many of our students actually use our time that we can get with them for free as a little bit of counseling sessions, because often a lot of the stressors come from some of those teamwork, leadership, other challenges that you may have, whether it's maybe you're having trouble with a group for an assignment, or you just took over running this club and nobody wants to help you make the events happen on the board. So how do you handle some of those challenges? The students will spend a lot of that time with them talking through that and getting some confidence behind the actions that they're going to take going forward.
Right. So, and feel free to disagree, but a lot of the stress markers that we chatted about, like, having to say no to things, or do I go to this event or do I not go to this event? Do I socialize in this or do I sleep? I feel like, and this is just my opinion, that these are markers for this bigger stress of like all of us, substantially paid a ton of money to sort of get this thing. And like even if you got a full ride, whatever, somebody else still paid for it. Like somebody paid for you to get this opportunity. And so finance has become like a big albatross on your head, and it's sort of like if you don't get the job you want, or if you don't get the return on your investment, sort of a thing, it sort of adds to more stress, which then dictates like, okay, yeah, maybe I should go for that Microsoft or whatever event, Michael, you were talking about, even though I don't see myself to be in this career path. Maybe I should try, because what if I don't get what I want? So I think that sort of is driven by a lot of this motivation of we are under a lot of debt. So I wanted to ask you of the basic primal debt of being in student loans and having to pay it back in a reasonable amount of time, and if that added more stress to you, and how were you able to manage it? And whoever wants to go can go. I'm not cherry picking anymore for this question only. All right, so Joe, I'm going to start with you.
So I am very fortunate. I do have a full scholarship to Cornell, but I can talk about just having anxiety related to finding a job.
Yeah.
Because regardless if you do have a scholarship or not, this is still 2 years. Most people are taking off from making money, and so there's a lot of pressure there to find a job when you get back. And I think, I think it comes down to something that I've always just done, personally, and a lot of times as a certified yoga instructor, just taking some time to breathe and realize that everything is going to be okay no matter what the situation is going to be.
Right.
And that really just kind of lets me take a step back and realign like what priorities I want to do. There's nothing wrong with going into business school and saying, okay, let me have a plan B in case things don't work out. Like, let me have an industry that I'm also interested in, maybe, and maybe let me go to some events in tech, even though I think I want to do more banking, whatever it may be. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think, realizing that, you've come here to, change your life in a lot of aspects, and the school wouldn't have admitted you if they didn't think and have the confidence in you that you would be able to make that sort of change, and you have those skills. So I think ultimately, it comes down to just taking some time to look at yourself and letting yourself know it's going to be okay, and being able to move on to, whatever post MBA goal that you have.
Yeah. And, like often, no, totally agree. And I think it's important to be focused. And I felt that a large section of business schools are really big. And Michael and Josh, I'm going to get your responses to this as well. Business schools are really big. Most of them are like over 400 or so students. And even smaller class size business schools have at least like 300 students, right? And you have students with very different backgrounds, right? And I felt that, I had friends who were ridiculous in the amount of money that they could afford to spend. And I had friends who were very, very frugal. And I had friends who were just downright cheap. I was probably one of them. But my question is, often business school events and business school treks are things that are very superfluous, at least in my opinion. Like, for example, in my business school experience, people would just go to like a random trip to Japan with like 2 weeks notice, which I found pretty ridiculous. But that's also because I'm from a different background. I generally don't associate myself with someone who takes a random trip to Japan. But that created some level of stress, because do I do it? Like, if even if I'm on borrowed dough, do I still go and pretend that I'm enjoying it and I'm not worried about my money at all? So anyway, I'm just talking out loud about things that sort of stressed me out. But anyway, going back to Josh and Michael, you guys chimed in and unmuted, so I'm going to go to Michael first and then come to Josh.
Yeah, my response to that is I think that I and a number of my classmates have kind of had a bit of a cognitive dissonance to to the loans that we've taken out, because again, like we're only in this experience for a couple years, and this is one of the few times in life that we'll have the freedom to take those spontaneous trips, and to do so with relatively low risk. And so I've definitely seen the different range of people who come from wealth, who can do that more often than others who certainly don't. But I think it's important to know that those people, they all still get along, and nobody will judge you. Nobody's going to judge you for not taking a trip to the Hamptons. I just want to let you know that now. I think there's a perception among business schools that if you're not doing that and you're doing something wrong, like, no, it's not real. So hope that gets out of people's mind, whoever sees this in the future or now. Another part of that is when you think about almost future returns, if you're going to any of these schools on this panel or outside of these panels, you're gonna be okay. Like if you've made it to that level in life, you're doing something well. You have the skills to succeed. I think to a point made earlier, the school sees something in you because you have something in you. You're going to be okay. So even if that adds a couple more months of loans that you have to carry to do it, you're gonna make your money back. So live while you can. Live while it's still while you still have the opportunity to do so.
Awesome. So YOLO it away. I'm kidding. But Josh, I meant to ask you because you wanted to chime in as well.
Yeah, so I think a little bit sort of on the more practical logistical side, there are a lot of different resources that will likely be available to you.
Yeah.
You're most likely going to be in the context of a larger university, and many universities these days are looking at these situations. It might not be as apparent in the business school because a lot of the students come with some financial backing from their previous work at the business school. Right. But that's not necessarily the case with a lot of the other graduate students on campus. And there are definitely resources that are usually available to all students, whether it be help with food or other scholarship issues or healthcare and things of that nature. Another way is there's a lot of stuff you're probably paying for in your life now when you have a job that may or may not need to be part of your life in business school. So one of the things, I had cable before I went to business school, but I didn't actually use it that much. And then I didn't even really have that much time to use it at business school. I was just doing other things. So drop that out. And there's, however much money a month that's no longer getting spent on that.
Yeah.
The last piece I would leave people with is building off Michael's point that you're going to probably be okay. Don't let money drive all your decisions. I know for my summer internship, it was a significant pay cut versus some of the other offers that I got. But I honestly feel like I'm happier here, having a bigger impact and really enjoying the work, more so than I would at some of the other offers, and opening myself to opportunities I never would have had before. So especially with the internship, even if it might be a low paying internship, take that opportunity, try something new, try something you'll enjoy. The money from that internship is not going to have a huge impact in the long-term scheme of your finances.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what the money from the internship is. I mean, I was making decent money, but I was in California, so I paid most of my money to the IRS. So whatever I had left was just paid for rent and food. So anyway, all right, so we are sort of out of time. I'm going to get one last comment from each of you about if you had to do it all over again, what would you tell your past self to do better to manage stress and time? I'm going to go reverse order. I'm going to start with Joe, and then Josh, and then Michael, and then Aishwarya, and then Tess. So one thing that you wish you had known, I guess.
Yeah, I think, when I think back to all the different stressors that kind of come into business school life, whether it's making new friends or recruiting or, just trying to fit in, I think I wish that I would have just spent more time to enjoy, some of the littler elements of school, kind of like the more subtle things that happen, like even just like getting coffee with a friend, or like going to the movies, or going, or spending some time catching up with people, because
Right.
so much of your business school career is really your network. And you make a lot of connections through whatever recruitment you're going through. So, I know a lot of people through the consulting program, but I wish that I had spent a little more time getting to know people in banking, or getting to know people in tech, maybe. So there's really is an avenue, like even if you're at a larger school, to spend some time just getting to know people that are outside of your circle sometimes, and that added diversity just really adds to your overall experience as you continue to navigate not only your MBA experience, but also your post MBA experience as well.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. Definitely helps. Michael, if you wanted to go first, you could have just told me. You didn't have to go out and come back in.
I promise there's tech issues. I promise.
All right, go ahead, Michael.
I understand, Michael. Don't worry.
It's always hard to follow Joe too. So, but no. If I had to like give advice to, I guess, what August 2019 Michael Henry, I mean, the biggest thing that I'd say is it's going to be okay. Breathe, and don't look at success being a life or death thing. Whether the internship you get is exactly what you want, which it is. Thank you, AB and Bev. Whether it is getting the grade that you wanted, whether it was getting the board position that you wanted, just know that you're going to survive. What you're going to end up as at the end of this experience is a smarter, more connected, general, better person. And so take a deep breath, sleep a little bit more, and it'll be okay.
Awesome. What about you, Josh? What advice would you have for yourself?
I think my advice to myself would be to make a little better use of some of the downtime that you do get. The minis, quarters, semesters, whatever you have, they're very busy, but you also have breaks. And the break can be this like big valley lull. So whether that's, maybe taking an hour out of my day during winter break to work on recruiting things or practicing my interview skills, or doing things like, instead of being lazy this Friday night and just watching TV because I don't feel like going and drinking, well, maybe just grab a couple friends and watch a movie, get some socializing in there, or trying to take advantage of some of the great resources and some of the great cities that we'll all be living in doing this process. So like Pittsburgh has basically free museums for all of us. I've been to 2 of them. And so taking a little bit better advantage of some of that free time when you're feeling lazy or not wanting to do the big things, but to do that to help get you better prepared for when things are stressed.
Awesome. I'd like to add too, I think one of the things that I would tell myself not to do is being stressed about being stressed. It's this weird meta thing. I think if I could just do stuff without thinking about how stressful it was, it would be really helpful. Anyway, Aishwarya, go ahead.
What would I tell myself? I think I would tell myself that it's okay, because I think most of the intensity that comes into your mind and the stress that starts bubbling is at the very beginning of your MBA, when you start realizing that, hey, you're not the only smart person in the room, or you're not the only type A person. Everyone around you is just as good, and everyone around you has an opinion. They are as confident as you are, and you're going to have difference of opinions. You're going to have grading curves that you're going to find yourself in surprising places on that curve there. So I think one thing that I probably would have done much better with was, it's okay, it's fine. You bring yourself to the table, and that in itself is quite substantial. So you don't really need to keep running this race and trying to prove yourself at every single moment of your day. Your classes can be normal learning adventures where you can enjoy yourself, enjoy what your peers have to offer, and still come out absolutely confident of yourself. I think that initial stressor, if I had had this insight at that point, probably would have turned out much better, much more positive. But here we are, wiser by the year.
Ashriya, we heard you and we agree with you. We couldn't see you anymore because
Oh my God.
I think you froze just a touch. I think you just want to follow Joe and Michael. So
see, I have to keep them company. Somebody needs to help them.
Tess, I want to go to you. What advice would you have for yourself?
Yeah, I wish 2018 Tess had all of you, because I think all the advice that has been given is really excellent. I would have told myself that your MBA program is a really wonderful, but also like really weird microcosm, and it's not the real world. And so make really good use of that time. Be really intentional. Don't let the experience carry you, because you're going to have a lot of pulls on your time, as we've discussed, in different directions. But be really intentional about who you surround yourself with. It's important to know who you are as a person, but come in with a hypothesis about what you want to do, and then be open to the idea that the experiences and people you meet might change that. And that's okay. I think one thing Darden says a lot, which I love, is that, especially around recruiting, it's a 2-year process. And it's really a lifelong process because of the network that you're investing in and building. And so really view it in a broader sense, rather than like the fall that is, first year recruiting. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think also like to see things temporarily is just so beneficial. You don't have to worry about, what all this leads to. But anyway, we're terribly out of time, but thank you so much for being here, sharing your stressful stories and sharing how you managed it all. This was awesome. This was one of my favorite panels, and thank you guys so much for not saying no to this. And I'll let your schools know that they selected really cool people for this panel. And yeah, no, I hope to see you guys soon. Let's keep in touch through whatever, LinkedIn, I guess. But no, I'd love to hit up when I see any of you again. Also, thanks so much for joining. We are starting early tomorrow as well. I think our first session is at 7, but at this point I've lost track of when our sessions are. But tomorrow we start at 7, and I think we start at 6 actually. 6 a.m. Pacific, so join us for that. Tomorrow we have another panel, and then Saturday is our last day. Thank you again for joining, and I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks,
you so everybody.
Much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.